Good morning. Thank you for joining us at Vitralogy Explains Local Law 152, also known as New York City's Gas Inspection Regulation. My name is Natali Rodriguez, and I am Vitralogy's Compliance Specialist. And we have a guest speaker for all of you guys today. Joe Santullo is the CEO of Systems 2000, and we are both very excited to share with all of you today not only what is Local Law 152, what is involved, but what exactly did we all learn this year, which was the very first year that a lot of buildings in the tri-state area actually had to perform this gas inspection. So let's get started. Okay, so what is Local Law 152? As all of you may know, Local Law 152 was pretty much introduced in 2016 and is monitored by the Department of Buildings, where the agency is now requiring a gas piping system for all buildings to be inspected at least every 4 years by a licensed master plumber. Now, there are a few properties that are exempt to perform this inspection. And before I continue, I just realized I forgot to hit record. Okay, so as I was saying, Local Law 152 is monitored by the Department of Building, and they are requiring properties in the tri-state area to perform a gas piping system inspection every 4 years. And the buildings that are exempt from having to perform this inspection is your R3 occupancy buildings or your newer construction, where obviously they recently just performed that inspection, so they would also be exempt. Like every local law in New York City, something happens, some sort of catastrophe where we react to it and enact a new local law. And that's what happened with Local Law 152. There were two major explosions that occurred here in New York City. One in 2014 in East Harlem, where unfortunately 8 people died and 70 were severely injured. And then a year later, all of us may remember the East Village explosion, where 2 buildings pretty much had this gas explosion, and as a result, 2 people died and 19 were severely injured. So as a result, Local Law 152 came about. Now, what does the inspection actually entail? So this testing is only done for your public common areas on all your floors that contain a gas piping or gas utilization equipment. So all of those will be inspected, all the exposed gas lines from point of entry into the building, including your service meters up to individual resident spaces, but not inside their apartments. They would need to be inspected for evidence of corrosion, deterioration, or even illegal connections. So the inspector, in this case, a master plumber, would test your common areas using a portable gas detector. They will also be checking your boiler room, your mechanical rooms to determine if there is in fact a gas leak, to check if in fact your connections are code compliant. Now that we know what is entailed, when should you actually go about scheduling your inspection, right? So if you're in the community district 1, 3, or 10, during this pandemic, you were probably the very first ones that actually had to perform your gas inspection. And it's actually due at the end of the year. So you have until December 31st if you haven't already performed your Local Law 152 inspection. So for properties in other districts, what I would recommend is that you schedule your inspections in the spring or summer months, well in advance of your heating season, right? Because if your master plumber finds conditions in your piping system, then you wouldn't want any gas interruption that would have to be shut down so that they could perform the required repairs. Now, if your building does not have a gas piping system, you will still have to get a master plumber to certify that you actually don't have one. So they will still go out and inspect your building just so that they could file that report confirming that you do not, in fact, your property does not, in fact, have a gas piping system. Now, there's different cycles and they are all based on what community board your building is a part of. If you do not know which community board your building is in, you can search in NewYorkCity.gov. I made a note here where you can actually visit this website. I'll leave this slide here for a second. So you just could make a note of it where you can visit that website and actually enter your address and check which cycle you are actually in. Okay. Now, with everything, right? Some things may not go as planned. You may be very proactive and may still experience a gas leak. The plumber may still find one. So things may not go as planned where, everything turned out fine. So if a problem was in fact identified during the inspection, if an unsafe condition was in fact found by your plumber, you have to report the issue to your utility company, whether that's Con Ed or National Grid, right? So they would have to know that there is a gas leak in your building aside from the DOB, the Department of Building. So the building owner must take immediate action to obtain the required permits and correct the issues to be in compliance with the New York City construction codes. And if there is a corrective action that needs to be had, the property owner then has 120 days to resolve the situation and file a new inspection certification signed and sealed by your licensed master plumber who conducted that inspection, stating pretty much that the corrective action did take place. However, if dangerous conditions where it's dangerous to someone's life is actually found, these are not deficiencies, these are severe conditions, then these severe conditions would need to be repaired immediately. You don't have to wait the 120 days. You would have to arrange for those repairs to be had right away. The master plumber would pretty much get approval from the DOB and the National Grid or Con Ed so that they could go ahead and start those repairs right away. Okay. Now, what are the owner's responsibilities? So the inspection happened, everything was fine. You have, within 30 days, your plumber will give you a report. It's called the Gas Piping System Periodic Inspection Report. So within 30 days of the inspection, your contractor has to provide you with a copy of that report, pretty much reflecting what were the results of your inspection. The building owner, once they have the report, it is their responsibility to file that report within 60 days, and that report must be signed, it must be sealed by your licensed master plumber. Now, if you fail to do that, you may have in fact performed your inspection, but if you fail to still file your report, it can result in a $10,000 fine. So be very cognizant of that, and don't sit on the report if it's not signed, if it's not sealed, if they provided it to you without it having the required execution, then give it right back so that you can file it right away. Now, at Vitralogy, we understand how complex New York City regulatory the landscape is, which is why here we created a New York City regulations wiki to help the real estate industry understand what exactly is involved in order to be in compliance. So I made a note of the website here at the very top so that you guys can visit it at any time. And if you have any questions about any local law or regulation, you can submit an inquiry, as you can see in that white box there. And someone in our compliance department will get back to you. It doesn't matter if you're a Vitralogy customer or not. This is a resource that we have created for property managers and building owners in New York City. Now, I would like to take this moment to give the floor to our guest speaker. So our guest speaker today is Joe Santullo. He is the owner, CEO of Systems 2000 Plumbing Service, and he can be reached, his, if you require services, you can contact them at 212-327-2277. I'm going to repeat that again, 212-327-2277. All right, and now I'm going to give the floor to Joe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Santullo. I am a New York City master plumber and the owner of Systems 2000 Plumbing Company. We are a full-service plumbing company located on the Upper East Side in New York City. We are known for gas restoration, gas testing, and have a full service crew for any of the details within this local law. We are now 40 years of business, and we also do anything from your day-to-day service up to full gas repipes or any type of plumbing system repipes.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. I've been working with you for a couple of years, and you actually solved a few of my most complex plumbing issues where I thought I could never figure out what is causing this problem. And the moment you sent me your guys, they were able to figure it out. So I am forever indebted to you, which is why when we picked this topic, I was like, okay, I need to ask Joe to come on and actually tell us what happened this year with this gas inspection. So that's personally why I have every respect for you and your guys. They're very professional and so knowledgeable and helpful. So with that, I wanted to first ask you, to prevent a possible inspection deficiency, as I highlighted, where you only have a limited amount of time, right? You only have about 120 days to address those, right? So now for people that they're not in this cycle right now, to prevent them to be deficient, what are some things that you think they can be doing now in preparation for next year if they're in the next cycle?
I would definitely contact a master plumber who is certified for these tests and get them scheduled as soon as they possibly can. There are only a certain amount of companies that are doing these tests, and as this year passed, a lot of people thought that due to COVID, they were pushing this off, this local law, and were being flooded with phone calls to try to get their buildings inspected by the 31st of December. So I think it's a very important thing not to let it slide and get it into full action.
So as far as the restoration process, right? Like you do the inspection and your guys come back and say, we actually have, it failed and we have to actually replace some of your gas lines in part or in whole, right? Like what does that restoration process look like?
Okay, in the event there is a full building shutdown, it can be very important to get the domestic hot water and the heat going quickly. let's say if we did something this year and the building was found to fail and either Con Ed or National Grid shut them down, it doesn't give you a lot of time. We're in heating season. Domestic hot water is a necessity, and so is heat. So it is very important to make sure that you have the proper and the necessary steps in place by either a temporary boiler, temporary hot water tanks, and at that point to test the system in its entirety. And if there are sections that you can isolate, which are leaking, those sections only will be isolated and restored. Depending upon what we find, we will replace necessary piping and restore those buildings as quickly as possible.
So you mentioned, temporary boilers and hot water heaters. I'm assuming there's a permit period to have that in place. To even have those temporary measures, be set up at the property. How long would that take?
Usually we can get temporary, probably, it depends on what building we have. We have some buildings where the boiler rooms are upstairs on the roof.
Yeah.
Those are more difficult. We would have to bring something within the building in order to take the electric that they have in that area and install electric hot water tanks to provide the building with domestic hot water. As far as heating goes, depending upon what kind of system they have, we either put a mobile boiler outside or we do something in the electric source as well. So that can take anywhere from a day to a week, depending upon the difficulty of connecting to the existing system.
Okay, so it's not like the lead time for a temporary measure would be like 4 weeks or anything like that.
No,
so if they're completely shut down, worst case scenario, it's like 10 days, if that.
Yeah, in the last week, we had 2 buildings that were shut down by Con Edison. And within 24 hours, we had the domestic hot water restored with a temporary electric hot water heating system. And luckily, their heating system right now, we're pretty good, and we're going to actually get them back on within a week or so. So we should be fine when it comes to the heating source. But as far as, the further you push this into the season, that can be a difficulty when it's very cold out. So that is
right, which is why I said, my recommendation is to do it in the summer months,
Correct.
even the spring. Like, if you're waiting until the fall or winter time to start doing your gas inspections, you don't know if you're going to pass or fail, especially if you weren't proactive and doing a pre-inspection on, when you weren't on the cycle. So it's a risk that, building owners can take if they wait to the very last minute.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is wait for the last moment, only because a lot of people are pushing these things off. Even master plumbers that do provide these tests are very busy right now. And, you have a lot of buildings within these districts that we're all trying to get to before, that 31st of December.
Yeah.
So it is very important to do it. And the best time to do it, of course, in the spring or the summer, in the event there is a failure and the building has to be isolated and shut down. You have, warm temperatures to deal with. It's a lot easier to heat up water, and it's just a lot better as far as heat goes.
Yeah.
Not to worry about it.
Now, we are in budget season as property managers. October, November, everyone is drafting budgets for next year. And, obviously we can't really say, oh yeah, this inspection costs this much if we haven't even seen the property. But ballpark, what would you recommend property managers and building owners should have as a line item just to prepare for this, whether it's $5,000 on the high end or 20,000? I don't even know what it is. So what would be a placeholder in your recommendation? Again, not knowing the type of building, how many meters they have or anything like that. At a minimum, how much should they be budgeting for this?
The local law 152 tests range around $3,000. If it's a larger building, it can be around $5,000. So that should usually cover them. If there's any deficiencies found, that could be done, they can ask for a price. They're very entitled to do so.
Right.
And you can either take care of it right there and then. If it's a time material or a small thing, that would usually cover them. It's around, I would say, $5,000.
Okay, that's not actually as bad as I thought it was. So for the last 4 years, New York City has actually been anticipating this, local law, right? We've been told about it in 2016. We pretty much have done whatever we can. This was the first year. If you were in the first cycle, what did you experience this year when you were out there doing the first year of compliance?
A lot of people have called only in the last, let's say, month or so.
Really?
Yeah. We did get some calls, during this time period that everyone was either working from home. We were in full force here, but a lot of the managers were worried about other things at the time. So in the last, let's say, month and a half, we have been flooded with tests, and we're doing approximately 30 to 40 of them a week.
Wow.
To try to keep up and get them done, because they're all, of course, anticipating getting this done way before, heating season, and we're in it already.
So, I guess the first year, no one anticipated COVID-19, and everything, it just threw everything off, right?
Correct.
And to your point, like the last thing we were thinking about was this gas inspection, which is probably why now people are, things are opening up again and are actually like, oh, wait, it's almost the end of the year. What haven't I not done before 12/31? So, as far as that goes, what do you anticipate? What should we not do? Obviously, we've talked about don't wait till the last minute. Are there any other things that you would recommend that we shouldn't do going forward if we haven't already done it? If we haven't already been affected by this cycle? So if you could give us a little like do's and don'ts, just some advice.
Do's and don'ts when it comes to the gas system are pretty much standard. Make sure the gas rooms are free and clear of any debris. Anywhere you have gas piping, you want to keep them clean and clear. As far as corrosive agents go, you want to keep those away from gas piping. If you have any vaults within buildings, we find that a lot of decay happens within vaults where there's a high humidity.
Right.
And in some buildings that we have been servicing for the last, 15 or 16 months since this has come around, we have made sure that we keep those areas dry. You'd be surprised. The point of entry is usually a very big part of this test. And where you have the differences of temperature between the outside and the inside of a vault, it is very important to keep that piping as dry as possible. That's where it will actually become a level 3 or level 4, which is sometimes an automatic shutdown. Otherwise, your rise valves, you should have them tagged, which is very important. The building does not have them tagged already. I would definitely recommend that every riser has an identification tag hanging off it, so you know what riser valve goes to what. And otherwise, I would figure to get your master plumber, who is basically licensed for this type of test, to line up his conduction of the test right away.
Yeah.
And get that set up. And do not wait till the last minute.
I have another question. So, for you to actually perform this inspection, you and your guys had to go through a series, you had to be cleared, right? You had to take a course and actually be cleared by the city to actually do this. Is there, I guess, we don't know, we could call a master plumber and not know whether or not they're certified to do this work. Is there any resource that we can use, or maybe even ask a master plumber as proof that they actually can perform this inspection, so that if we are ready to file the report, it doesn't get rejected?
Yeah, you want to make sure that they have a qualification for this test, and each employee that they send out to do the test also has to have that qualification.
Okay.
It is a card that you can ask for. We all have them. And we had to go through, schooling and testing.
Right.
And of course, actually, we were in Con Ed's plant for quite some time. And we have all had to pass that test in order to get that qualification. And the plumber that works for the master plumber also has to have at least 5 years experience in the field working within gas systems.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is very important, and there's a master plumber's due diligence in order to, make sure that that is correct, which we have. We have around 20, 25, actually 25 men that are doing the test for us. So, your master plumber will probably not take this test if he is not qualified, because, you have to list a lot of information when you do file a GPS form. So I do not recommend calling someone that you have doubts in. There's probably quite a few companies that do these tests and are qualified.
Right.
And to make sure you.
So if we call anyone, we could just ask them, hey, can you provide us a copy of your
qualification.
Your qualification card? And if they send it to us, then we know to execute that proposal. Okay, that's good to know. So going back to maintenance, I just wanted to get your opinion as far as painting the pipes, right? Like I've walked into many basements as a property manager, and I would see, all these gas lines painted. Is that acceptable to kind of mitigate any gas leaks temporarily until you can actually have it repaired? Or is that frowned upon? Like, what's the city's opinion about that?
Okay, well, when it comes to painting of gas line of any sort, at one time the city actually wanted that done.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably around 20, 30 years ago. And then there was, there was a big thing that where they didn't want any gas piping painted whatsoever. And if it was painted, they wanted to test it at 90 PSI versus a 3 PSI test, which is huge. Last year, they took that rule away. And even if a pipe is painted, as long as it's not painted in order to encapsulate a leak of some sort, the piping, if it is shut down, the integrity test will be at 3 PSI, not 90 PSI. So you are actually allowed to paint any gas pipe you want.
Okay.
It is not frowned upon whatsoever. However, it is illegal to paint it and hide any type of leaks with any type of epoxy paints or epoxy itself. But you can actually paint a pipe. It's not any problem whatsoever. The city does not frown upon it at all.
Huh. That's good to know. So those were all of my questions. You definitely entertained my curiosity for sure regarding the gas inspection. I would like to now open it for Q&A for our participants here, and just give all of you guys an opportunity to ask Joe any questions that you may have regarding the local law 152 gas inspection. If you guys can just put it in the chat and we will read it out loud and answer you.
You covered everything very well, Natalie, in the beginning. You went over all the details. Just want to let you know that.
Oh, thank you.
You missed a trick.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure at least I gave them the gist of what is involved, and then obviously you went into the weeds of things. So good team. All right, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions. All right. So Joe, I want to actually thank you so much for joining us this morning and doing our very first webinar at Vitralogy. We are actually going to be having a series until the end of the year. We're going to have another one next month regarding cooling towers. And there's new changes on that front also. So we will be educating everyone and inviting everyone once again. But if there's, Joe, a topic that you ever want to talk about, we will certainly have you again, because like I said, I definitely respect you as the professional that you are, and your guys really, like, I've had some terrible plumbing issues, things that we could never figure out. And then your guys was like, well, did you check this? So like I said, definitely made my job as a property manager a lot easier. So thank
We
you.
take it very seriously.
Yeah.
You know, we
Your
carry,
experience definitely says a lot about that.
yeah, we try our best with every client that we work with.
Oh, we have a question. So it says, I would like to know, since these are busy times, what is the timeline you suggest, Joe, we should schedule the inspection? And what information do you actually need as the master plumber to book the inspection?
We would need the building address. We can take everything from there as far as the BIN number to the building and everything else. Right now, we're around 3 to 4 weeks out testing. So if someone were to get us an address, we can supply you with a price in order to perform the local law 152 test. And if approved, we would set it up within a 3-week period or so.
And what is the suggested timeline that you would have? So like my recommendation was the spring and the summertime. Are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best thing to do, and I've done seminars for probably almost every management company in New York City in the past 2 to 3 years. And, you know, I told everyone that it is probably the best time to do it is in the spring or the summer. In the event of something, you know, it's a lot easier to handle, you know, whether if it's 12 degrees out and you got to shut the heat down, you know, there's always, just want everyone to understand that don't be so afraid, because Con Edison, unless there's a very bad leak, we always usually try to isolate and keep the heating on.
Okay.
And, you know, if there's gas applied to a boiler, we try to isolate that from the cooking, if the cooking is usually the problem. And a lot of these gas boilers today are elevated pressure, which means they have a booster.
Okay.
And that piping is usually welded. And as it comes in from the street, it is separated at some point from the domestic system on the cooking. So in the event you are doing this local law 152, and if there is a small problem on the boiler train, it's usually fixed in an hour or so. It's usually not a huge deal.
So what I'm understanding, Joe, is that for Thanksgiving, I could still cook my turkey, but I may not have heat.
No, the opposite.
The opposite.
Usually any problems that we mostly find are on the cooking side, not on the boiler side, because as Con Edison brought in elevated pressure to New York City, a lot of people jumped on that program and either converted their boilers to gas or did dual fuel. So that piping is usually welded and was attested at a great amount. And it's usually not our issues. Our issues are usually on the cooking side. So that, you know, and basically you have to understand that when you're isolating a building, the first thing we always try to do is keep the heating on and a domestic hot water. If we have to shut down the cooking, which is usually the old things behind the walls that are the problems, or the rise of valves or things of that nature, at least we try to keep the hot water and the heat on from what they are being served with from the city, from Con Edison. So in that event, you know, cooking with a hot plate or something of that nature, as long as the building allows it, you know, is one way to go around it. But we specialize in the restoration of gas systems within New York City. We've actually replaced probably the largest gas systems within high-rise buildings in New York, some 560 families. And from soup to nuts, we would open up protection, replace the system in its entirety, and restore the actual walls or whatever else was entailed. Within our company, we have our own contractors, own carpenters and plasterers. And we've done that in less than 6 months in 500 family buildings.
So we could have a deficiency where, like you said, just the inspection, at the very least, it could cost us $3,000 to $5,000. Let's say the repairs, you know, are what they are. What should we budget, worst case scenario, just to get permits?
Permits for the work?
Yeah.
Well, if we're doing, let's say we have a gas leak, we would call an emergency work permit, an EWM. And we would start right there and then. Those permits can range between $300 and $700. So, and then if it's able to be within that permit. It's not a big deal. The things are, once you get larger than that, say you're doing a full system repipe, you will need an engineer on board, and they handle their side of the filing, and the master plumber will handle his side of filing. So that, as we all know, once you get into engineers,
there's additional costs to consider. Okay.
correct.
All right, we have another question. He says, I arrived a bit late to the presentation. Is the local law 152 inspection required annually or every 4 years? Or would the time frame be based on the results of your inspection?
Okay, that's a good question, actually. There's a few things I would like to go over with that. Now that it's wonderful. If an inspection is conducted and there is a problem, the inspection will be complete, but it has to be inspected again once that work is done. So the later of the two inspections will be the inspection the building department will have on file. So that is one answer. The other is it's every 4 calendar years for every building. And that is it. There's no other way around that. It has to be done within every.
And you would know which 4 years you actually fall on based on your community board, which you can search in NewYorkCity.gov.
Correct. Yeah, all the community districts are there. It's pretty clear to see.
Okay, any other questions, guys? I think that's it. Yeah. All
Okay.
right. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please visit Vitralogy.com. Check out our wiki because we have a plethora of local laws and city regulations explained just like this on our website, and you can contact our compliance department. Again, you don't need to be a Vitralogy client to do so and use that resource. Joe, if you want to give your phone number once again, and that's it.
Yeah, you can reach us at 212-327-2277. We're 24 hours. Feel free. We're here most of the day until at least 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So,
I leave at 5.
yeah, feel lucky. We're busy this time of the year mostly.
Well, thank you, Joe. And thank you everyone for
Thank
joining.
you, Natali.
Have a good day.
You too.